Okay, let's see. Yes, we are live. Happy Tuesday, besties and bosses. How are y'all doing? Let's see if we can get this pulled up in my group so I can see your comments because the thing for Facebook never wants to work for me properly. So we're going to do that so I can see when you join on live. We've got a good conversation today, and I think this will be really valuable and hopefully simplify, demystify a whole lot about making money in your business, making big money in your business without chasing metrics that don't necessarily get you the results you want. So let's see. Seeing all of your beautiful content in my group, but I'm not seeing the live stream. I know it'll pop up. I'm going to keep chatting while I find this, but I do want to find this because if you are live, a couple of things. Let's talk giveaways and what's going on. But before we dive in, so what we're talking about today is how to make 10K months or more with a small audience. And I think maybe what's helpful to know is this conversation came from, Chad was actually having in my mastermind. I recorded a podcast around this. It's coming up in a couple of weeks where we were all talking about the results ourselves and our clients have had with really small audiences, and just realizing I think how much of a conversation this is needed in our space, because I think most people believe you need a really big audience to make 10K months, definitely to make $1 million in business. I think what's very helpful to know, why don't I see this live? I think I am live. Sorry, I'm not very good at multitasking, y'all. Okay, I see that I'm live. If you see me live, please say hi. I'm gonna keep scrolling here. This is so weird. Okay, there we are. I found myself. Okay, now I can stop being distracted. So I think maybe what's helpful to know, just to give some context here as well, is that I today have been in business 7.5 years. Obviously, I think it can feel like, why is Kim talking about this? My Facebook group has what do we have? A little over 16,000 people in here. I think I have a smallish audience on Instagram at this point. However, and now I run a booked out multi-six-figure business. I only offer one-on-one. We make around $350K base per year with plenty of room to scale because I have a revenue share model, which means my extra income anywhere I scale really comes from the revenue I'm making from clients. So just to give some context here. However, I think what's helpful to know is that I made my first 6 figures in business. It has now been, please don't be mad at me if I get the numbers wrong. It's 4.5, 5 years ago, whenever that was. I had about 500 people on my email list. I think I was actually closer to 300 people on my email list when I made my first 6 figures in business. I had less than 1,000 people in this group. I think I actually started the group the year, because I started on Instagram and then started my group a couple years into my business. So I think we had maybe 1,000 people in this group. Don't quote me on that. And I made multi-six figures, my first multi-six figure year in my business. I think we had less than 800. Well, I think we had less than 500 people still on my email list around that time, because that happened a year later. But I think more importantly is just looking at some examples outside of my own business. I have, and looking this year, because I think it's one thing to talk about this and to hear from people who are talking about what was true even 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but just to normalize for anyone who's like, what the heck is going on in our online space? Our online space has changed quite a bit, I think quite a bit over the last year to 2 years. So I want to give some client results that are happening now, because if you're hearing about what I did 4 or 5 years ago, that's great, but that's pre-COVID, that's pre our online space blowing up, that's pre some of the industry contraction, that's pre some of the economy stuff. So let me just share some numbers as well, and then we'll dig into, really wanted to dive in more with you around how you can leverage a small audience to make reoccurring 10K months or more in your business, and some of the nuance that goes into when people are talking about how to build a small audience. I think sometimes it can be very confusing. I want to actually give you some nitty gritty nuance in terms of how people are literally doing that and making that work. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So some other numbers here, just to give you, again, some context here for currently what's going on. So I have 2 clients that come to mind who are on track for multi-six figures this year, and one who's on track for $1 million this year, so in 2023, who currently have audiences under 400 people on social media. So I think that's just really helpful to see. Under 400 people on track for $1 million, under 400 people in their audience on track for multi-six figures in their business. I have a client who's making reoccurring 20K cash months and her audience is under 500. I have another client who's making 25 cash months or more who has an audience under 400. I could go on and on and on here, but I think just to give some examples, those are this year in 2023, just to give some examples of audience size in terms of the revenue, because again, I think we just have, and I think there's just honestly messaging that speaks so much to the importance of list growth, audience growth, and I think sometimes we miss what is actually important for why you're building an audience in the first place and what actually leads to the money in your business. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So before we dive in more, because I'm a little distracted cat today when I was getting myself set up here, 2 quick announcements. 1, if you're live now, anytime during the live, drop me emoji, tell me you're here. You will get entered to win access to my self-study course, Content That Stands Out and Sells. This is a self-study course I created years ago, but literally people have taken it before hiring me and told me that they've used this to make, I'm not exaggerating, 10K in their business by implementing these content shifts. I think it's a pretty good one. I think it still really stands up because it's foundational principles and not like algorithm hacks and tricks. So not a lot of people comment live on this. So if you comment and tell me you're here, you have a very, very good chance of winning that. And I like to do that because I love having, hey, Laura says hi, happy to be here and I'm loving this topic. Hi, I love you. I love having you here. Thanks by heart, happy to know you're here. Other announcement that I'm always excited when we have masterclass time, but we have a new masterclass coming up this month. I'm like extra fired up about this one because I wrote a post in the group about this, but the masterclass coming up is called The Path to Consistent 10K Months. And it is all about helping you walk through the clarity, mindset, strategy, and action that allows you to not only make a 10K month, but understand what goes into the reoccurring 10K months. Because it's one thing to make a 10K month or whatever you want, a 20K month, a 5K month, a 100K month. The number is not necessarily relevant, but I saw a post in a Facebook group, another Facebook group, where someone was asking if it was really possible to make 10K months in business with a small audience, right? As a coach doing what they were doing. And I just saw literally like 30, 40 comments under there of people saying how it's not possible, how people making that much money are lying, how they're not paying themselves. It was all of this trash, or people disselling the person who asked that very unhelpful advice. And it broke my heart a little bit. And it just made me realize how much noise there is out there that is doing the opposite of letting you see what's possible. It's telling you how impossible things are business, which is extra hard when you're in the starting phases of business where it does feel a little bit more challenging. Let's just call it how it is. The path to your first 10K month is the hardest phase in business. It's so much easier after that. But I also realize how much misinformation there is in terms of what actually goes into making reliable and reoccurring revenue. So that's part of what this live stream is about today. But the masterclass, we're going to dive into that. I'm going to have you map that out together. It's completely free. I will drop a link for that. I think I'm not even going to try to guess the link off the top of my head. I think it's kimmargetsinger.com/consistent 10K months. But if you go to the top of my group, you can click on the banner to sign up, but we will also drop a link after this live stream for you to sign up. I would love to have you join me. You'll get a bonus playbook that will help you fast pass your what you're implementing from that to get those results in your business. You'll also be entered to win a free full-length coaching session with me, and not like a mini teaser session, but a full-length session. So I can't wait. I think it's going to be a really, really good one. I think it's going to be one of my best master classes, and I cannot wait to share that with you and to just demystify some of this, because what I hope you walk away with what we're talking about today on this live stream and in that master class as well is just understanding that I am not saying results happen overnight. I am not saying there's a magic formula or a one-size-fits formula, or if you take this master class, then tomorrow you're going to make reoccurring 10K months, or that it's super duper easy. And it's also not as complicated as I think a lot of teaching or people make it out to be or think it is, and it actually can be quite simple. It might take some time. There might be some learning curves to overcome. There might be some mindset stuff to work through, but it's actually very possible, and I think it's very realistic. If you're good at what you do and you want 10K months, I think that is a very realistic goal for most business owners. I think not every business owner having a goal of $1 million, not to say everyone can have the goal they want, but I think that's a very different conversation. But I think this is actually a very realistic goal if that's something you want. So I would love to have you have you join me for that. Okay, let's talk audience size. Let's talk making money. Let's talk about all of this. So I think the first thing here that feels important to speak to, and let me actually pull up because there are a couple bullets I promised y'all. So I think the first thing we want to talk about that I think sometimes gets confused is when we're having a conversation like this, I think the mind goes to a couple of things. One, most of you are being sold through other people's marketing how important audience size is, how important visibility is, how important reach is, how attention is where the money is in your business. And I think then that can be very confusing when you hear that, and then you hear someone like me saying, you don't need a big audience to make 10K months or to even be on track for $1 million, right? Those can feel like two very conflicting things. So lots of thoughts here. But first, of course, being visible is important. Of course, getting the attention of people and building know, like, and trust in relationships is important. Of course, building an audience of some kind and having a customer journey is important if you want to make reoccurring revenue in your business. And if you have a business model, and I think this is let's get into some of the nuances here that don't always get spoken about. I think if you have a business model with an offer where you don't need hundreds and hundreds of people to meet your revenue goals, let's say it's a 10K goal, you don't actually need as many people in front of you as you probably think you do. And the standard conversion rates you hear a lot about, so if you were running a launch, for example, and we were just going like more traditional, like we're gonna run some Facebook ads to a landing page to bring in cold traffic, to warm them up, to go through a conversion event to launch your program. There are standards in the industry in terms of what normal conversion rates are for that. And because you're bringing in cold traffic and because probably volume, we would expect smaller conversion rates and we would want more people coming through that funnel. And of course, if you're launching, like, of course, all the people, like, that is part of something that you want. When you have a smaller audience and you have a business model that doesn't require tons and tons of people, you actually have an opportunity to kind of blow the standard conversion rates out of the water. And I'm going to explain why and how, and I'll like literally walk you through the how on this. But you really do have such an opportunity that I think people don't realize they have and don't take advantage of, to lean into the things that actually create conversions. And I think what happens is when that is your business, so let me give an example here, what I mean by this. If you have a business model, let's say you're like me and you have a one-on-one business model, right? I only focus on one-on-one, and I think I hold more one-on-one clients than most people who do one-on-one. I have anywhere between 20 and 25 clients at any given time, depending on how many intensives I want or how much I want on my roster, right? Let's say you want 12 to 15. I think that's probably maybe more around what most people, there's no wrong or right here. Do not hear this. If you have 8 one-on-one clients, don't make that wrong. But just to give some like general numbers here, that means you really only need, and let's say you're pricing in a way that even if you're charging $500 a month, I'm going to grab my calculator here. We're just going to do some simple math. So let's just see, 10,000 a month divided by 500. So that's 20 clients. So just want you to see something here. You don't even have to have a super high ticket offer. I'm not saying you have to have 20 clients, but we're just going with some simple math here. You don't have to have a super high ticket offer, and you don't have to have a gazillion people to suddenly be set up with a business model that is, I think, that's pretty accessible, right? $500 a month for coaching, I think, is pretty accessible for most people for one-on-one support. 20 clients, okay, sure, maybe that's more, but like if you're doing this full time, and that's not even raising your rates to $650 or $1,000 a month, you can suddenly see how, if you have a business model like that and you're priced in an appropriate way, it doesn't have to be a super high ticket price, you have a business model that does not require hundreds and hundreds of people to come through the door. You need 20 people to come through the door. And if you have a business model like this that is allowing you to have reoccurring revenue because people are sticking around, and you book one client in, right, but it's a 6-month container. You don't need 20 new clients every month. You need 20 clients every 6 months, and ideally, you're doing an incredible job supporting them. And let's just say half of them stick around to renew. That means after your first 6 months, you only need 10 more clients the next 6 months, right, to be able to continue to make 10K months. So hopefully this is like kind of boring, basic math, but hopefully that's making sense, because and we'll talk about that part more in the masterclass, but I think just seeing that, and suddenly you see, oh, so that means if I was charging $500 and I had 20 people come through the door and they were on a 6-month contract and half of them stuck around and renewed, basically over the course of the year, I would need 30 people to come through my door and hire me. And suddenly I think if we see, oh, I would need 30 people, and that's if I was charging $500, and I think most of you are charging far more than that, right? We can suddenly see how you don't need as many people as you think you do. But here's what happens. Instead of seeing the math here and seeing, oh, my job then is to go out, and you don't even need 30 people at once, right? You need 20 people, and most people don't want to book 20 clients in 1 month. That would be, I think, that'll be overkill even for me, right? You want a couple at a time that you're building up to. So that probably means for you, if you have a handful of clients, you want 1 to 4 clients a month, let's just say, or 3 clients a month. if you can start to see this, you start to see, I don't need a huge audience, but also your focus can shift a little bit, because what happens is when we don't see the simple math here and we don't see how that leads to 10K months, and we just see, oh my gosh, $10,000 a month, how am I going to do that? People are telling me I need a big audience and I need a big email list, and like conversion rate is like 1%, and whatever the noise is going on, what happens is instead of looking at what are the action steps, what's the strategy that helps me bring in 1 to 3 clients a month that I'm going to retain, what do I need to do there, right? Instead of really focusing on less is more and building really deep relationships and leveraging the kind of strategy that's going to bring in those clients, what happens is the focus goes to building an audience. And building an audience, that is a very different strategy than booking in one-on-one clients, like what we're talking about here. You might not have a one-on-one business model. That's just the example we're using. But those are 2 different business goals. Those require 2 different strategies. And again, I'm going to go back to some specifics here, but just so hopefully all of this is making sense, because I think what happens is when we hear this, we're literally focused on the wrong goal in business. We're closing the wrong gap, as I say, or solving the wrong problem, as my coach Lacey Seitz would say. This is something I know my clients sometimes get really frustrated on me with, because they'll come to me and they'll have a really great strategy they want to implement and dive into that's all for audience growth. And like, cool, yes, this is going to grow your Facebook group, except for that's not our goal in your business. Our goal in your business is to bring in one-on-one clients. And these are 2 conflicting sales goals, strategy goals that we're focused on. We can do that, but what that's going to do is grow an audience. And it doesn't mean that some of that, of course, as you grow your audience, you're going to have more people come through the door. Some of them will convert into clients, but that is very different than focusing on a lead generation strategy to bring in potential clients through the door, right? And for most of you, unless you have a big, massive team, right, we want to focus on one goal at a time so that you can do less better, so you're not burning yourself out to create the results you want. And so then it's very easy to focus all of your energy on building a big audience. This is how people come to me, and I'm not making this up. People come to me with audiences of 70,000 people, 100,000 people, really big audiences, but they don't know how to make $10,000 a month from that, because an audience is not the same as having a really clear customer journey and knowing how to convert the people in front of you into clients. 2 different things, right? So what I would say is the way you make $10,000 a month or more with a small audience is A, having a model that allows you to do that, B, having price points that allow you to do that, C, understanding what your focus is, and seeing your focus is then on creating conversions and learning how to do that, learning how to convert the people in front of you, not on how to grow an audience, and seeing those as 2 different skill sets, 2 different strategies in business. Let me know if this is making sense and tracking, because I always want to make sure, and if there's any questions. Right, again, there's nothing wrong with, just use a Facebook group here as an example, with growing a Facebook group, but that is a strategy for growing a Facebook group, not for bringing in clients. Even if your Facebook group is part of your funnel for bringing in clients, they're just a slightly different focus. And so one of the reasons my clients get those big results with smaller audiences is they're really clear on what their goal and focus is. And they stay really locked in on that focus, which is, my focus is to book a client. My focus is to make money, not audience growth. And they know that when they focus on that, they will get audience growth as well, but they don't get it twisted on what they're focusing on doing. This is a silly example that comes to mind, but I've been playing around on Instagram a little bit more just because it's fun. And I'm in a season in business where my focus is not necessarily what we're talking about here, where I can focus a little bit more on content and audience growth and things like that. And I was just thinking about, I'm like, oh, it'd be so easy to just go down the rabbit hole, like trying to hack the Instagram algorithm and doing all the reels and doing all the fun things, which would be super fun. And I'm sure that would serve my business, but I could literally figure out how to hack reels. Like it's not that hard to do, right? And spend all my time doing that. And that might not mean a single thing for my bottom line at all. And I could also not do any of that. Let's say I have a client spot open and focus on the things that bring in leads and generate clients for me, which is not the same thing, right? And bring in a client that's going to make me exponentially more money than literally the money I would spend to hack the algorithm or like team hours to grow a bigger audience. And so I think these are things, again, Not to say growing an audience is wrong or bad, or there isn't a time, like, of course, we always want to have more people coming through our world. Of course, we always want to be visible, but I think just really be mindful of what your goal in business is and really understanding what helps you meet each goal. And so, what my clients and I focus on is really understanding that, but then really learning how to convert the people in front of you before you go out and just try to get more and more people. I think what happens for a lot of entrepreneurs is if you're not getting the sales you want, it's so easy to be like, well, I just need more people in front of me. I got the wrong people in front of me. I need the more people in front of me, instead of, or maybe it's that we need to learn how to convert who's in front of us. I have a friend, I don't think she would care, but I probably even know who she is, some of you, but who I think made her first $10,000 a month with something like 49 people in her Facebook group. And I love using that as an example because it's such a great example that it's not about always the number of people, but what is the depth of relationship, and do you know how to convert the people in front of you? So I'm going to give some nuance to that, and then I'm also going to share, before we end this conversation, one really important thing here that I think is not always talked about when we're talking about how to make $10,000 a month or more with a small audience, and I really want to make sure we hit on that because it's probably the biggest piece here. But I think in terms of what we're talking about with this scene here. Okay, Laura says yes, totally makes sense. Thank you. So I just saw the comment come through. What was I saying? Oh, so I think the thing to remember here, so when we're talking about converting the people in front of you, I do not want someone to hear this and to make themselves wrong. This is not like you don't know how to convert clients in front of you. I like hate that shit so much. That's not it at all. And I know me, my first year in business, probably would have heard me say that and think that. I think it's just seeing, again, what's the right gap to close. And if you're not selling a $37 offer, you don't necessarily need a big offer. If you're selling a $37 if you're selling a $37 offer, you probably do really need to focus on audience. If you're selling a course that's a one-time purchase, right, where there isn't an opportunity for reoccurring revenue, you probably do need to focus on audience, right? They're just different problems to solve. But if that isn't you and you fall more into some sort of service-driven work that's a little bit higher ticket, that has an option for your reoccurring revenue, I think, again, it just comes back to seeing what's the opportunity in front of you and what's the right gap to close and focus on. So instead of hearing me say that and be like, oh my God, I don't know how to convert people in front of me, I would even ask, but is that even what you've been focused on? Because I think sometimes we're doing a lot of things in business and we think, of course, Kim, I'm focused on booking clients. Of course, I'm focused on conversions. But I wonder if you're not getting the conversions you want, if that's actually what the sales goal and marketing goal and focus is, or if it just feels like that's the overall thing you want, right? Again, just going back to the simple example, if I'm looking to grow my Facebook group, that does not mean I'm focused on bringing in clients. If I'm focused on converting the people in front of me, right, of course, clients and money is the top level goal, but those are two very different marketing strategies. I'll use my podcast as an example. Maybe this will be helpful to hear. My podcast is designed for conversions, to convert the people in front of me, which means I have a lot of one-on-one conversation around things or conversations about solo episodes and really focus it around what I think would be supportive to you and then sell into my next step, which we'll talk about more in the masterclass. If my focus with the podcast was to grow a big audience, let's say I had a big launch coming up, let's say I was selling a $37 masterclass or something that I wanted to have a little pop and I wanted to get a bunch more listeners, I would not do solo episodes. I would have a ton of guests come onto the podcast, and that would help me reach more people, right? That would help me grow my audience, but that would not help me convert as much because I would be focusing on highlighting someone else and not my work in the same way. I would be having them pitch whatever their opt-in is, not my work at the end. I wouldn't be selling my work at the end. And that would be okay if my goal was audience growth, more listeners for the podcast, if that was a part of my overall strategy. But if I was sitting here thinking I want my podcast to bring me in one-on-one clients and all I'm doing is highlighting other people, right? That's an audience focused strategy, not a client, not converting the people in front of me, helping them get to know about me and my work, and conversion strategy. So hopefully that nuance makes sense there. So what I would say is don't hear this and think you don't know how to sell or you don't know how to convert. Sometimes it's simply the awareness of, but literally what am I focused on marketing and selling in my strategy, and is that aligned to the goal I say I want? And then with that, I think also just starting to understand then if you have a smaller audience and you want those bigger revenue numbers, what I would say, and I think the biggest opportunity people leave on the table is seeing when you have a smaller audience, you have such a gift and such an opportunity to build deep relationships and to honestly just do the shit that makes you stand out that someone with a big audience simply can't do. There are pros and cons to both, right? Like, it is beautiful that I have a big audience now. That is great. And if I run a challenge next week and we have a challenge in this group, it's very unlikely. I have a full roster. I am supporting my clients. We have a big group here. Let's say everybody in the challenge submitted their stuff in the group. It's very unlikely, unless I'm paying a support coach, that I'm going to be able to go in and give everyone personalized feedback and personalized support and help them really see what it's like to work with me, right? That's just probably not the opportunity I'm going to have because there's more people in the group. If you have a smaller group, I have a client who just did this, and she ran a challenge, and she has a much smaller audience, and she killed it. But one of the reasons she killed it is she really leveraged the opportunity that comes with a smaller audience. I think we hear small audience and we think, oh, that sucks. And what I would say is there's such an opportunity there because she gave everyone such care. Everyone who submitted through the challenge, submitted questions, she just served the shit out of them through that. And of course, then that converted at such a higher level than the industry standards, right? That's how you start to convert at rates that are higher than what we would say traditionally would convert with something like a challenge. If you have a large audience, don't freak out. This also doesn't mean that you can't have conversions with a large audience, but it does just start to look different. And so what I would say for you is if you have a smaller audience and you want 10K, 20K, 100K months, I would be really trying to hold the frame of mind of how does this work for me? What is my leverage point here? Not what am I missing? How do I go and find more people? I would really be thinking like, how is this working for me? How is this a season in my business where I just get to lean in and do something that I'm just not going to be able to do later? It's sort of like having this conversation also with a client last week. She's really she's brand new to business, and she just booked her first client, and I'm so proud of her. And one of the things we were talking about, she's offering an incentive on her offer, and I was saying, look, you're at the beginning stages of business. You have such an opportunity where you can offer incentives, where you, every time you raise your rates, we get to use that as a marketing opportunity. There are just opportunities built in here because you are new, whereas when you're fully booked, you have to be a little bit more mindful of the incentives you're offering because you don't want to not have it be fair to your roster of clients, or we want to be a little bit more mindful if you're like what's going on with your marketing because there are other people that affects. And so I would offer that to anyone. I think it's so easy to get into someone is marketing how to like, email list growth and like you need to do this or you'll never make money because social media is going to crash tomorrow, which like by the way they've been saying that for the last 7.5 years I've been in business. So far, not to jinx anything, but like social media is still here, and I run data on the back end of my business. 17% of my clients come from my email list. The rest comes from social media or from referrals. So, I think let's also just like have a little bit of context there. And I want to read Laura's comment in a moment. So not to be glib, not to say something couldn't happen to social media or our accounts, but then we would all figure out what to do. And you would still have an audience that you built a relationship with. So I think sometimes there's a little bit of doomsday marketing out there. I also have an email list. I do think it's beneficial. I'm going down a little bit of a tangent here, but I think the point here is seeing what was the point I was making? You just have a different opportunity. And what I would really invite you to do is instead of hearing, this is the point I was making, instead of hearing someone's marketing online, that's really good marketing. Remember, marketing is designed to hit on your pain points and to hit on your pleasure points and to get you to take an action based on that. So if someone is saying, hey, you don't have enough leads, you're not making the money you want, the key to that is to grow your list, and that's what you need to focus on, or everything could go away that you don't even have yet. Of course, you're like, oh my God, I need to take this program in this course. And I would just invite you to say like, yeah, maybe that's true, if that's actually the goal you're focused on and the strategy that makes sense for you. And also, what opportunity do you have in this season of business? What's the opportunity for you when there are fewer people in front of you? It is a fucking gold mine. Like, it is legitimately a gold mine. Okay, Laura says, this is something I know logically and it's so easy to forget, and it's why so many people are exhausted from doing all the things. Thank you. I love you. Yes, I think it's just so easy to forget, and that's why I'm glad you said that. And I think that is so. I actually love social media. I built, the majority of my clients come from social media. They always have historically in my business. We're going to talk about how some of my clients are getting results off social media, and that's why they have small audiences. So I do want to talk about some of that as well. I love social media, but I think one of the reasons it doesn't burn me out, and one of the reasons I love it, yes, I have team now, but I'm just thinking back to my earlier days when I made that first 6 figures, or I made that first multi 6 figures, is I think I just, maybe not the first year of my business where I had to unwind a lot of this stuff, but once I started making money, I just got really focused on what are the few levers that bring me results. And I'll go tinker around and play with things, which is sort of like the Reels conversation. If I didn't do one-on-one, I'm an actress, right? I'm a creative. I would actually fucking love to create Reels all day long. I think it would like be the most fun thing. I'm just so aware of what drives results and where my time and energy needs to go and how much shit does not matter and then how much shit does. But I just make sure I do the stuff that does. And I know, Laura, I know you know this, but I think it's just helpful for everyone listening because every day on social media, someone's going to tell you something different to do. And I just want everyone here to see the results in your business come from doing less better, not from doing all of the things. And that's at every level. That is at going to your first 10K, that is scaling to $1 million. I have a client on track for that this year, and he's working less than ever before. But part of the reason for that is we're so focused on what are the few levers that matter. How do we do them better? What is all of the stuff we need to cut out? That's how the revenue is scaling, not because we're adding on a bunch more hoops to jump through. And I think similarly, part of this is just, I keep saying this in this conversation, but I just want people to hear this. It's also just really understanding what drives results in your business and what your current goal is. So you're focusing on those things. If you have a small audience, instead of, I don't know, spending money on Facebook ads or like cold DMing a bunch of people or whatever the strategies are, I don't even know what people are teaching these days, right? Like, what would it look like to just actually message the people in front of you with a heartfelt message and ask if you can support them for free, right? If you have an audience of 20 people, I guarantee you will make so much more money if you reach out to all of those 20 people with a heartfelt message and offer them some sort of service and taste for free, which you can do because you're in that position where you don't have a massive audience, than if you spent the next 3 weeks trying to build the most complicated funnel or trying to grow your email list or trying to, I don't know, follow and unfollow people for the next 3 months. And I think these are just the things that we sometimes forget. It just can be so much more simple, but we have to know what we're focusing on. The other piece with this, just so I don't go too far down rabbit holes, with talking about going deep, not wide, and the opportunity in front of you, I think the other piece that is important to know, so there's 2 pieces here. What I would say is important, and when I look at my clients who are getting big results with a small audience, 2 other things we're really looking at. One, I think this is important for you whether you have a big audience or small audience. I've talked about this all year. I think this is, on the strategy side of things, probably the number one thing. If for any of you, like, this is the number one thing I'm focused on in my business this year, strategy-wise, this is the number one thing I'm focused on with clients, is being so drilled in on messaging and really, really just honing that. But what's great is if you have a small audience, couple things happen here. One, yes, I think you do need I think in some ways you need less of a drilled in audience because you can reach out and connect with people personally. If you're doing that, your message doesn't actually have to be as tight. I think that's more important with a larger audience. But if you have a smaller audience, the opportunity for you is you have a chance to connect more. You have a chance to survey people more, to ask more, to get the information that feeds your message. Because I think sometimes we hear message and we think it's just that one-liner on our Instagram bio, as opposed to, really, what are your people thinking? What are they going through? What do they actually want? The more you intimately know that and can infuse that in your messaging and speak to that, the more you will convert with any size audience. But when you have a smaller audience, you just have such a better opportunity to be in touch with that. And not that you can't, I mean, I think I'm pretty in touch with that, but I work with people one-on-one, so that makes it a whole lot easier because I hear it all day, every day. But I think just seeing, like, again, what are the opportunities here? Yes, being focused on your, like, messaging is just kind of an important thing in business, especially if we're leveraging social media. I think it's less important if you're not leveraging social media, but we're here on Facebook, so all of us are. But I think just, again, seeing what is the opportunity for me with a smaller audience that I can really lean into. The other thing in terms of those conversions and kind of going deep, not wide, what I work with my clients on a lot, and the clients who are getting those big numbers from smaller audiences, I know I've been like on this all year, but it's because I think it's just so important. We talk so much about booking clients. We do not talk a lot about what goes into booking clients and keeping clients, which is knowing how to bring in the right fit leads, the right fit people into your audience. So if you have an audience of 1,000 people, or 70,000 people, but they're not the right fit for what you sell, who the fuck cares? Right? But if you have 20 people in front of you and they are the right fit, or 10 of them are the right fit for what you sell and for what you're doing, you actually will make far more money than that person who has an audience of 1,000 people or 70,000 people who aren't the right fit for what they're selling. Hopefully that's making sense there. And I think a really good example of this, when I started my business, so I started on Instagram before I started Facebook, and I do not do this. Do not do what I did my first year in business. I got one of those, it's like $50 a month. You pay a bot and it like goes and likes people's content. I think it maybe followed, unfollowed, it likes people's content, whatever it did to grow my audience, and grew my audience to 10,000 because I wanted that stupid swipe up thing you used to have. I don't even know if you can still pay bots to do this. Please, for the love of God, if you're hearing this, do not do that to your business because it killed my Instagram account. It killed our reach. To this day, well, I don't know if we'll ever get our reach back in the same way. But I have spent my time and my team's time over this last year. We have deleted thousands and thousands of people from my audience. I think I had like 12,000 people. We got it down to about 8,500. We've in this Facebook group over the last year or two, we've deleted, I think, 3,000 people from this group. So for exactly what we're talking about here. Sometimes, I wasn't even chasing numbers. At that time I was though. When you're doing that, you're just filling your audience with people, but they're not the right fit leads that turn into right fit clients. And then it's actually, all it's doing is killing the algorithm for you to actually get in front of people. And not to say you shouldn't grow your audience and that shouldn't be a goal. I don't want to have that conversation. But when we're filling our audience with people that aren't actually a right fit lead for what you want, that actually does more harm than good, because there are algorithms on the online space. And so if you have a bunch of empty accounts or dead accounts or people who don't actually engage with your content, you're telling the algorithm, when I put something out, no one wants to pay attention to this, don't show it to more people. If you have a small audience that are the right fit people and you put out a piece of content and they want to pay attention to that and they do engage with that, and engaging can just be reading, it doesn't have to be liking it, right? You're telling the algorithm, people like what I have, show it to more people. Show it to more people. So I think just even seeing strategically how there are just so many benefits that I think we forget about, and chasing numbers for the sake of chasing numbers, like, please do not do what I did. But we can love Paskin for that, because now I can share this with you. But we can just see how it's just so easy to get hooked up on big audiences, big numbers, big list growth, and to not realize how it either does nothing or is detrimental if we're not really focused on bringing in the right fit leads. Another example I use a lot, around that same time, I did one of my best performing opt-ins ever. I could have marketed the shit out of this. I could have told you, here's the best performing opt-in I did ever. Copy me. This got so many leads on my email list. It was a hashtag guide. And looking back, it's fine. This was like baby Kim in business. This was before I did business coaching. It converted so well. And it converted really well because it was super simple and it was something everybody needed, except for everyone I got into my email list with that was looking for what? Instagram social media support. What do I not offer? Instagram social media support. It was not bringing in right fit leads. It was adjacent. I'm sure like a handful of those people became right fit leads, but I would have done myself so much better I created what we now have as a course, as a mindset guide. And that did not bring in the same number of leads, but all of those leads were qualified. That opt-in made me so much more money in terms of like literally people would book calls from that and turn into clients. And so I just want to keep giving you examples here to be really thinking through the lens of how do I, if I have a smaller audience, even if you have a bigger audience, how can I be more focused on bringing in the right fit leads through my marketing and really focus on building those deep relationships and working on conversions instead of growing my audience just for the sake of numbers, or when I don't even need more people in front of me because I'm not focused on turning those people into clients. Okay, hopefully, I always want to know if that makes sense. But, Laura, I don't know why these pop in late. Probably because I was just on a riff. Laura says, something that's been front and center for me this year is that the simplest choice, especially the most obvious action that's right in front of you, is usually the best and most effective. I think that's also what you're saying here with doing more with less. Love this in you. I love you. Yeah, it's exactly what I'm saying. It is exactly that. It is, I think, Laura, you could speak to this. You're a coach, right? I think this is also, that's why I still work with a coach, because sometimes the most obvious answer is also so obvious. We can't see it for ourselves, but the most obvious answer is usually the answer. The simplest answer is usually the right answer. I think for everyone, if you have a complicated answer, I would just guarantee there's something, like that's just the way your brain is trying to get you in your own way. The simplest, most obvious answer is usually the path forward. And for everyone, the way you get compounded results is by doing less, more of less and better. And not more from a point of burning out, but if we think, this is like the cheesy example everyone uses, but I think it's just so great. If we think about light, and you think about a light in a laser beam versus in one of those really big flashlights, they both give tons of light, but one is wide, one is kind of diffracted and everywhere, and it's just not as potent of light, and one is really concentrated and really going deep into one little pinpoint, and it is so much more focused, and that is why it's a laser that can like cut through things. That's what we're talking about in business, that it's just when we take what we have and we do more of less better, that's what blows up results, always, every day. So with what Laura is talking about, do I have any other examples here? I think those are the things. I also want to talk about a little bit of the nuanced truth around people who have small audiences who are getting these really big results, the 10K, the 20K, the on track, the multi-six figures, on track for $1 million. Because I think I think there are a few people talking about small audiences getting big results, but I think this is a nuanced piece that gets missed from the conversation a lot. If I'm talking about a client or a friend who has 49 people in front of them and turning that into 10K months, I think what we don't always hear, aside from like, yes, knowing how to convert the people in front of you, is a couple of things are usually happening when someone has a small audience and they're turning it into 10K months or more on repeat. One, just going back to the offer piece, I think we just have to be so fair to every business, being really clear on what is your offer? How many of your offers do you need to sell to make your revenue goals? And do you have an offer that allows you to have reoccurring revenue? That is a big part, it just is a big part of it. My client who's on track for $1 million, one of the reasons that they can do this with a very small audience is they have a very, 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 very high ticket offer. So yes, they have to know how to sell that and who to reach out to and to build that relationship, but they need to sell very, very few of those to be able to reach their revenue goals. So I think remembering that nuance, but the other thing is that most people who are leveraging small audiences to get big results are also strategically leveraging other audiences or other ways outside of their audience to bring in results. And what I mean by this, and I think this is just helpful to know, if I use myself as an example. I made my first six figures with, I honestly think it was less than 300 people on my email list. However, I just told you 17% of my clients come from my email list. And that doesn't mean that more aren't on my email list, but just in terms of like where we're seeing the direct conversions come from. And I do think my email list probably has more to do with those sales, because I think this is a whole nother conversation, but all of your marketing kind of works together to support different aspects. So sometimes, and I think a lot of things with email right now, just for everyone who's an email list, I think what's maybe helpful to know, what I'm really seeing happen with email is that email, people are reading them, they're opening them, they are supporting conversions that are happening on social media because it's supporting the relationship build, but then we're just so in our phones and on social media. A lot of conversions are happening on social media because that's just where a lot more of us are interacting. Not across the board, but just as if that's helpful to hear. Anyway, if I use that as an example, I think it would make it seem where it's like, but that math doesn't add up. I actually don't know. What is 17% of 300 people? Let's get the calculator out. I guess that math could work, but if I did my math right on my calculator, what really happened was, and the way I got to my first six figures is, yes, there were probably some clients from my Facebook group. Yes, there were probably some people from my email list, but I was also really focused on leveraging other audiences that were bigger than mine. And so audience in some way does matter. People do matter. I just wasn't focused on a strategy to grow my own. And so I'd say the majority of my clients when I made my first six figures came from other Facebook groups, not my own. Now that has completely shifted with the data. The majority of people come from this Facebook group who hire me. I think it's something like 90% or whatever that is. Some come from the podcast, but the majority come from the group and then the podcast. But that was not the case when I went to when I scaled to my first six figures or grew my first six figures. I was leveraging other audiences really strategically. I have a couple other clients where they might not be leveraging Facebook groups, but they're really strategically leveraging public speaking, whether that's in person, like public stages, right? But they're leveraging other audiences, or they're leveraging other ways to bring in people that isn't a social media audience, or they're doing podcast tours, right? To leverage another person's audience, to build that know, like, and trust, to bring people through the door. So this does not mean you need to do all of those things, but I think just to give some nuance there, because I think otherwise it can just feel like, oh my gosh, you have to be like a unicorn among unicorns at sales, and most of us get better at sales the longer we're in business, and it can just feel like, how the F do you, if you have like 20 people in front of you, turn that into a 10, like it cannot compute. And I think all of the things I said before are absolutely true, and I think you can do far more with what's in front of you than most of us understand. And I think this is just the nuance that doesn't always get talked about. I think what people are also doing is really smartly saying, hey, I don't need to focus on growing my audience. That's my secondary goal. My goal right now is to bring some money through the door. The easiest way to do that is to focus on the people in front of me and to go leverage some other audiences really strategically. So I would say that is one thing there. The other two things they're doing, and again, just to like demystify all of this, they're really leveraging their personal network and word of mouth referrals and their like personal outreach, like not just DMs, but in terms of one of my clients who's really blown up their business to high multi six figures. This sounds so simple, but they've just really been willing to reach out to their network every day and make connections and set up meetings and see where those meetings go. I've shared this here when I moved to New York City and I didn't have a network and I wanted to break into advertising and I had no business being in the advertising world. The way I did that, and one of the ways I got a job over people with far more experience, is I just reached out to people one by one. I took meetings to build a network outside of me, and I leveraged those relationships to help introduce me to someone new. I leveraged their network to build my own network, and that's how I got in the door of places, if that makes sense. So like every time I'd have a coffee meeting, I'd like thank the person, and I would ask if they would be willing to introduce me to someone else, right? Which meant I met one new person, but I was tapped into, I don't know, the 500 people they knew in the industry instead of me needing to know 500 people in the industry. So I think this is a big part of what people are strategically doing, and I do think in some ways that's easier. And we often, and I talk about this a lot with clients, are like, what's the low-hanging fruit in your business? I think so often we're like, that's too simple. And we want to just go for like the top of the tree and the hardest branch, where it's like the crazy email funnel on Entreport with like 600 layers of things, as opposed to like, or you could reach out to the people in front of you. But why do we want the fruit at the top of the tree, even though it's harder? Because it's usually the most uncomfortable to reach out to people personally, or to reach out to your personal network, or to put yourself out there for a podcast. So I think also to both say, yes, this is simple, but also just to normalize, if you wanted to reach for the top and not the easiest thing in front of you, or the simplest thing in front of you, I should say, I think just for a lot of people, it is the more uncomfortable, challenging step that can kick up quite a lot. So I don't want to diminish that either. Laura says yes, and coaches also need coaches, 1,000%. Coaches do also need coaches. I agree with that so much. I also, Laura, you'll have to tell me if you feel this is true or not. I did a Instagram story on this recently. I think there's also an element of, if you're a coach or if you're someone like us, I think it also just feels really good to be supported and coached. So sometimes even if we don't need it, I know for me, sometimes I just think, I'm like, I just love fucking being coached, even though sometimes it's challenging. I digress, but I think coaches also just get it and appreciate it at a whole different level. Not to say those of you who are not coaches don't get coaches or don't like coaching or don't benefit from it, but I think it's sort of like, as an ex-actor, I just love, like, I will always and forever want to pay money to go to Broadway or something like that, where other people are like, like I could take it or leave it. Okay, anyway, Laura says 1,000,000%. I digress, but I do have such a love for what coaching is. Did I have anything? Oh, the last piece here. Can y'all tell I had coffee before this call? The other piece I wanted to speak to here, so leveraging other audiences, leveraging the low-hanging fruit, the personal network, or creating a personal network and the word of mouth marketing and referrals, or leveraging audiences off online in terms of, I know this is like, it seems so obvious, but I think we forget that business existed before social media. And what did people do? They would go to networking events. I have one client who's making actually I have a past client. This is actually a better example. I have a past client, and we took her from 0 to 25K months. And the main way she did that was in-person events. She went to, and then she started speaking, but literally before that, it was just going to in-person events. But she treated it like a strategy, and she fucking crushed those in-person events. And she had, like, we would map out the calendar, and we'd be really strategic about where she was going and what she was pitching. You know, she had like a funnel in terms of how then the connection she was meeting, she would nurture them and bring them through the door. But she had a really small, I don't know if she had a social media audience, but that's how she grew to 25K months. And I just want to reflect that here, because again, I think we sometimes we get online, we know all of these things. There's no one watching this who does not know this stuff, but we get online and you start hearing the way you're supposed to do things in business, or the like, I don't know, the like hack to like write hooks on reels to have them go viral, which is great, except for that's great. And if that's what you're doing and selling, that makes sense for you, but not so great if like that's not that thing that actually brings you in clients and or what you're great at or skilled at. And just remembering there are so many other paths to 10K, 20K, 100K months. And so I just want to keep giving those reminders. This does not now mean that everyone needs to go in-person networking. I have never done an in-person networking event for my business because I don't like to wear real pants. I like to wear leggings every day, y'all. I have them on right now. I like to wear a blouse and be dressed from the waist up, and I don't want to have to go to a networking event ever. That sounds miserable to me. But I would do that if I needed to. If social media shut down, I would absolutely do that, and I would rock the shit out of it. And I think that's the other piece. All of the clients I'm talking about, they're also so willing to pick something and really work whatever that is. They're not too good for anything. I'm sure all of them, if I was like reels were the thing, would be like, all right, Kim, let's just figure out how to, and I'm not hating on reels. I actually really like reels. I've been having fun with them. But as an example, like they would figure out how to make that work. I'm just more saying the beauty is we're in a day and age where you don't have to do shit you don't want to do, but we do have to do something, and it's finding something that works for you. And this is how people with smaller audiences are getting really big results. They're finding these ways to leverage relationships they already have or relationships other people have created to bring people through the door, and learning how to really convert them and turn them into clients. The last thing here, and I've touched on this in a couple different ways, and I will probably talk about this again in the masterclass just really briefly, because I think it's something that I know everybody knows this, and it's sort of like sometimes we know something but we forget it, or we're like, there's also just so much when you're growing and building your business where it's just like, oh, like I have this all the time with my coach. I'll say something, I'm like, I know that, I just said that to a client. I just like didn't even realize this in my own business. So for everyone here, you know this, but two things. One, they have, I keep saying this, but say it again, they have offers that allow for reoccurring revenue, and they work as much at serving their clients well to create repeat clients and have a strategy for that as they do for leveraging their small audience or other audiences to bring in clients. And that is a big part of how anyone who's making great money from a small audience, a really big part of why that's possible. Again, going back to the $37 product example, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to sell, but that is a numbers game. You do just need, I'm going to bring out my calculator again. I did a post on this, but I can't remember it. If you want to make $10,000 a month and you have a $37 product, you have to sell 270 of those. So literally, if you have 100 people in front of you, it's not that you suck. It's not that you're not good at business. It's amazing. If you sell all 100 of those people by your $37 masterclass, that's amazing. And you're still not going to make 10K months, not because you're not capable. It's just like the math like doesn't math there is the way I always say it. And so I think knowing that, but then if that's a one-time masterclass versus a membership where people keep paying the $37, if you have a one-time purchase at $37 or a one-time purchase at $10,000, right? That's the same thing. That's amazing. If you design websites and someone pays you $10,000 once, that is so celebration worthy. But if there isn't a way for that client to stick around and to buy from you again and to be a repeat client, you have to start that cycle all over again. And so a lot of times when people are making, not across the board, I have clients who are designers, for example, who are making great money, but they're either finding a way to create reoccurring revenue, or they have a high enough ticket offer and they're really good at lead generation because they do have to kind of continually bring in new clients. Whereas if you have a reoccurring offer and you're really focused on how do I keep this client happy so they stick around, right? You're condensing the number of leads you need to bring through the door because this is a stat. It costs more money in your business to create a lead and to create a client than it does to keep a client. So it takes a lot more of your time and energy, or your team's time and energy, to create the lead and to create to turn them into a client, then it does serve them really well and to keep them as a client. And so that was the example we were using at the beginning with the if you had one-on-one coaching at the $500 a month and you had 20 clients, but half of them renewed, right? You only then need 10 more people. And so I think just seeing, and what that means is part of then what the focus is when you're thinking about your sales process. Again, see how this isn't focused on audience growth. This is focused on, what I need to be thinking about is how do I serve my clients well, but also how do I either have a way to have someone stick around, or how do I build into my strategy a way to encourage people to stick around? And not that they have to, or it's wrong or bad if they don't, but thinking about these things, that's actually the strategy and the play that my clients are more focused on than how do we just go and only focus on always bringing more numbers through the door, because that is a business model. And for some businesses that will work, but that is a little bit more of if you have a one-time $37 offer, a one-time $10,000 offer, your focus is a little bit more on audience growth and constantly bringing in new leads to reach those goals. So that is possible and that is okay, but that is when that is something you'd want to focus on more. Whereas if you have a different model and a smaller audience, the way you make that work for you is seen, well, then that's the benefit of your business model, right? I sometimes feel like I'm cheating in my business. I have the easiest business model, in my opinion, to make great money from, right? Like to me, it like not, and I don't mean that to diminish anyone who's like having maybe a challenging time. But I just think it's like I'm not selling big. I don't need to have a ton of people in front of us. We will always focus on that because I like staying in business and I always want to have clients. But I think just remembering those pieces so you're focused on the right thing. And so if you have a smaller audience and you want to leverage that to make 10K months or more, these are the things I would be focused on, and these are the things that allow that to happen. And then that way you're not making yourself wrong. I think this is the part here more than anything for everyone. You can have whatever strategy you want. You can have whatever business model. If you want to do all master classes and a membership, like have at it. But I think just being really aware then of what that requires and then what strategy makes sense for you. Because what I get bummed about is when people make themselves wrong, right? And it's like, you're not doing anything wrong. This just literally is what the business model you have is. And that's okay. But that just means we have a different set of things we got to play with and focus on. And so I hope this will help for everyone just to see you're probably doing way more right than you realize. And it's just really easy to think you're doing something wrong because you're comparing a lot of things in your business to something that's just very different in someone else's. Okay, wait. Laura said a bunch of things and I've just been like chattering along. Laura says, need isn't the right word. Just appreciate and being supported feels so much better than doing it myself. A thousand percent. And I've needed it as well. So I wasn't judging the word need, but I just like to have that conversation as well and to give people permission for that, because I think sometimes we need permission for that as well. Laura says, even though I'm doing it by myself, it feels like I'm not. Yes, 1,000%. I totally get what you're saying. For everyone catching up with our conversation, we're talking about coaching. And Laura says, this is super helpful and timely. I'm doing some minor adjustments to my marketing strategy. Thank you. Love you. I love you. I love you back big time. Like so big time. So yeah, I hope for everyone just seeing this, I hope this dispels a little bit of it. I hope this also helps you see there's no big secret when someone's getting big results or reoccurring results or doing so with a smaller audience. I hope this just dispels a lot of it. And so you can see, this is why, this is how. It doesn't necessarily mean it's happening overnight. Remember, overnight results in business literally aren't a thing. Please hear that. Everyone's got a different timeline for various reasons. That is a whole different conversation than today's live stream, but it is very, very possible. I do think 10K months and above are really realistic for most of you if that's something you want. I really do think so. But these are the things I would be thinking about instead of thinking it's so hard or so confusing or people are hiding things from you. This is like literally, these are real clients this year, again, right? Not during COVID, not pre-COVID, not in 2017 when the online space was a different space. This is what clients are doing this year that I see really working, but also how I see people getting those results without big audiences and some things for you to play with. And if you have a very different business model, that's okay also. I think then just, again, kind of the big picture we're talking about here is really understanding what are your sales goals? What's your current goal in your business for your marketing and sales? And then what's the strategy that supports that? And then do you have the business model and price point that's also going to support what those goals are monetarily. But I think the more you're focused on that, the easier it is to stay neutral and to see the forest for the trees and to take the actions in your business that are going to get you those results, as opposed to getting kind of just wrapped up in whatever the newest trend is. It doesn't mean those trends aren't fun, or it doesn't mean they don't even work. It's just they don't necessarily always get you the result you're currently needing in your business. And so I think just, again, remembering to separate that out and be like, wait, am I in a season of my business where I need audience growth, or am I in a season of my business where I really need to learn how to convert the people in front of me or how to leverage other audiences because I'm really focused on sales? Okay, that is all of the things I've got for y'all. If you have any questions on the replay, throw them at me. Don't forget, if you want to join me for this month's masterclass, The Path to Consistent 10K Months, I would love to have you. I think it's going to be a really good one. Some of what we talked about today in terms of like what you need for a business model we'll cover, but we're going to dig into the mindset piece, and then I'm going to walk you through the actual strategy that you're going to be able to apply to yourself. I do not believe in one-size-fits-all strategies, but just how to think about mapping out a strategy so you can actually create that kind of revenue month after month. And I can't wait. So that is happening in 2 weeks. I'll drop the link for that. Again, when you sign up, you'll get that bonus playbook that's going to help you speed up your results, and you'll be entered to win a free full-length coaching session with me. And I love y'all, and I will see you next week. And I'm on 2 toggles here, so I have to figure out how to end the live stream. All right, bye, y'all.